This episode was stoked to announce some support from a new sponsor and also a chance to win some fresh mountain bike kit for this winter weather. Dirt Ledge makes performance outdoor mountain bike clothing specifically focused on all-weather performance. They are also the original creator of their top product, the Dirt Suit, a waterproof yet breathable mountain bike specific onesie designed to keep you riding at your fastest on the wettest of uplift days or enduro rides. It's available in Gravity Focus Core Edition or an Enduro Focus Pro Edition in both women's, men's and loose fit specific sizes. The suit features a 3-layer membrane engineered to keep the wet out but still improve cooling airflow. 6 adjustable air vents for temperature management, waterproof pockets, reinforced seams, detachable legs and a reflective print. This truly is the perfect addition to your winter riding wardrobe to make the most of the mud and ride further and faster for longer. They've kindly sent me one too, and I can't wait to get out and test it. We've got the conditions at the moment, and this week I'm going to be shredding in the deepest of mud. We're also giving away a heap of Dirt Ledge products over the next 3 weeks, so head to our Instagram and Facebook pages and get involved to win yourself some photochromatic trail spec, a 3/4 Mountie jersey, and the top prize of a Core Edition dirt suit. So a big thanks to Dirt Ledge for sponsoring this episode. Hope you all enjoy the episode and go and check out the products on the website. Cheers. Hello everyone, welcome back to the Stay on Your Bike podcast. I hope you enjoyed the first episode of 2025 with Rich Houseman, and this week I'm really excited to chat to a good friend of mine, somebody I actually got the pleasure of racing against back in the day. He's done so much in the mountain bike industry, from being a World Cup podium downhill guy to doing commentary for many years, running a World Cup race program, and then obviously the head of now Velosolutions. So I'm sure you can all guess. Welcome onto the podcast, Claudio Caluori.
Hello.
Hey Claudio, thanks for coming on this week, and it's been a while since I've seen you, but I'm looking forward to for chatting. We've just been chatting briefly before we started recording, and you're just recovering from an ice hockey injury.
Do you really want to talk about that? It's embarrassing.
No, we can skip it. I mean, Claudio basically was back having a go at ice hockey. He did it as a kid, and then he did it later years. But like often, we dip in and out of sports that we enjoy. And yeah, he was back up to the Mighty Ducks level, I believe, weren't you, Claudio? And then just the knee couldn't take it.
Exactly. The foot wanted to go one way, my body wanted to go the other way, and so the knee didn't take it. Yeah, but funny thing is, hockey is actually what brought me both into mountain biking, and also later into the whole course preview thing, because my kind of second career as a hockey player brought me into Red Bull Crashed Ice, which is that racing down the hill, 4 against each other on a kind of a 4-cross made of ice.
Yep.
And that is where I started doing those course previews with many GoPros on me and talking to it. And that was quite a success. And that is why then later on I asked Red Bull, hey, why don't we try that at the Mountain Bike World Cup? Since it's such a success at the Crashed Ice, we should also try it out at the World Cup. And then we did it for the first time in 2012 in Fort William.
Yep.
And the views went through the roof. And so from there on, we kept on doing it at every race.
Brilliant. And yeah, you'd done that for a good while, didn't you?
Yeah, for 7 years, until finally I had a really good crash, and then Red Bull got scared and stopped doing it. I really wanted to continue doing it, but they said they cannot take the responsibility for it.
Cool. Well, and just remind us, where was that crash at? I remember it happening. I remember you got pretty badly injured and bashed your head up.
Yeah, that was in 2018 in Croatia at the World Cup, and we didn't realize it was that bad when we were there because I was still doing commentary with Rob after that. I don't know how much nonsense I was talking at that show, but it might not even be anything different if I talk nonsense. Um, yeah, but then a month later, I was feeling very dizzy and went to the hospital and they checked and saw my head was full of blood and we needed a surgery immediately to drain all that blood out. And then after that, Red Bull said, "No way, we cannot let you do that anymore."
Right. That's crazy, really, isn't it? I mean, luckily you went to the hospital and they found it and got it sorted because that could have been pretty dangerous, like.
Yeah, they said I might not have woken up the next day.
Wow. Wow. Well, yeah, that's yeah, I remember it being bad and it was a shame because yeah, I mean, obviously everybody, I guess that was a bit earlier on in social media and the sort of POV camera stuff for all the downhill and it's everywhere now. Everybody does it on Instagram and all the younger riders are flat out on it, but that was kind of more in the early days of it. And people, we sometimes forget that, we've done when you've raced World Cups, you know, you forget that most of the viewers that are watching probably haven't raced a World Cup, and it's a big interest for them to see a POV of the track, especially like yourself commentating, and then you're commentating on your own riding down the track. It's really interesting for people.
Yeah, and I think what they appreciated was that I actually wasn't going quite as fast as the top riders, so they could more relate to it. Because when you see the top guys going at full speed,
Yeah,
you don't even know, is this sped up or is
yeah,
this real? And how can someone even go that fast? And I was not not racing anymore, so my level wasn't that high. I just barely managed to get down the course, which was probably more entertaining because of exactly that. Because I was properly scared of doing some of those jumps,
yeah,
and I was always the first one on track, and no one else tried the jumps before me, and I was the first one to go and had to basically guinea pig
yeah,
everything, which was super scary, and
yeah,
I was nervous already a day before I had to go, but
yeah,
that's what made it so much fun too.
yeah. Yeah, because I mean, even when you're racing World Cups and you're at you're at your peak level, there's always somebody else you can watch do something first if you want to, and when you're doing the course preview yourself, then you haven't even got that option, have you?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, scary stuff, but oh, and all right, well let's go back to the very start, and we'll work our way through all the different amazing things you've done, if that's okay. Um, Obviously, everybody knows you're from Switzerland. Whereabouts did you grow up in Switzerland, and how did you first get introduced into biking and mountain biking?
I grew up in Zurich,
Yeah,
as said, as a hockey player actually, and my parents once asked me, "Hey, what about if we buy you a mountain bike, and so we don't need to drive you to hockey training every day because you can just take your bike to hockey training?" And I
yeah,
said, "Yeah, cool, a mountain bike, sweet." And soon after that, mountain biking became more fun than the hockey playing. So it didn't take that long, and I quit hockey and started racing mountain bikes. But that wasn't at all anywhere near downhill. It was the full-on traditional, cyclocross, road, velodrome,
yeah,
the full everything. And until I once came across a BMX track on a cross-country ride, and I've never seen a BMX track before that. And it's like, holy shit, what's that? And so I did a couple of laps on my cross-country bike with the seat. We didn't have dropper seat posts, so the seat was all the way up. Narrow handlebars, as you know.
yeah,
um, And that was so much fun that I went home and bought the BMX. And
Mm.
my father was like, dude, you're 18 years old. What the fuck are you doing with the BMX?
So you were 18 before you even really got into to bike riding.
No, bike riding was before that, but into like the
Okay,
gravity style of riding.
I see.
You
And so what kind of age were you when you got the mountain bike to go to the ice hockey and then did this cross country and cyclocross?
That was, well, start 16 or so. I mean, I've ridden bikes all my life. I
Yeah,
went to road rides with my father when I was a kid.
yeah.
But then the mountain biking came when I was 16 or so.
Okay. So
Yeah,
yeah,
or
no,
15, yeah.
what I'm trying to establish is, for anyone that's listening and the kids haven't taken it up, in the 6, 7, 8, 9 years of old age, you can still do really well if you get into it a bit later, like yourself. Um, it's I think it's more about as long as you're active and fit, you can jump on a bike and get quite good on it quite quickly, can't you?
Yeah, it always, it's how much passion you have it, how much you love it. That's
Yeah,
what,
yeah,
and when you get into something you love, that the last thing you think about is winning a race
yeah.
or like how good can I get
Mhm.
with this. So because you're just doing it because you love it. I mean, whenever you go dirt jumping, you just purely do it because the feeling of dirt jumping is the best feeling in the world. You'd never even think of how can I get a result in this. It's really not even a consideration.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. 100% agree. I mean, I was saying this the other day. Like if you went back in time and you were starting out at something and you could be really good at one sport, what would you be? What would you think would be the best feeling? And I was, I've been nowhere near the level that I'm talking about. But obviously, I'd done a bit of dirt jumping when I was younger, but not the kind of dirt jumping that you see now, where they're flying through the air like super high. I think that and being able to ride a supercross track must be the most amazing feeling in the world. Um, so
Yeah, but like going like a flat out down the mountain and downhill track is it's
yeah,
just as good.
yeah, I
It's
guess,
a little different, but yeah,
yeah,
you
yeah,
know it.
yeah, for sure. Cool. So, obviously, you got the BMX when you were 18. Your dad thought you were crazy. Can you remember what bike that was by any chance?
The BMX, I think it was a GT, like
Okay.
a cheap GT. And yeah, from there on, I basically spent the entire winter on the BMX track and not on the road bike anymore, which obviously resulted in next season at the cross country races, I would be the slowest one on the uphill, but the fastest one on the downhill. So I would be constantly passing everyone on the downhills and losing it again on the uphill. So then some of the friends I met on the BMX track said, "Well, why don't you come to a downhill race?" And so I did, and yeah, then you basically know the rest of the story.
And so, you know, as far as I'm aware, is it still the case that sort of cross country is still like the bigger discipline and the thing that more people get into in Switzerland than the downhill?
100%, yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
why do you think that is?
Well, Switzerland has a very, very big tradition in all cycling, endurance cycling disciplines. So we had really, really strong road riders, and then right from the start, we had some of the best cross-country riders with Thomas Frisknecht. and others. And there was always one guy that was at the top,
Yeah.
like Christoph Sauser, Ralf Neff, and then for the last, I don't know, 20 years, Nino Schurter.
Yeah.
Um, so obviously they're always in the media. They're very appealing for the kids. Um, we never really had someone who would win races in downhill. Now we do with Kamil for the last couple of years. So that probably changes a bit of something. And yeah, it's funny, like the competitive mountain bikers in Switzerland, they would more go towards cross country, while the non-competitive ones, they would then come into the gravity,
Okay.
and so they are more the riders who go together to a bike park and do big jumps and do a lot of style and tricks, and but they're not into racing.
Okay.
So those who are into racing, they mainly go into cross country in Switzerland.
I see. Okay. Interesting. And from doing road cyclocross and XC, did you find it hard to ride the 20-inch BMX at first?
Oh yes, big time. That was the hardest thing ever.
Yeah. And,
Yeah.
but you were that into it, you stuck with it because it's so easy. It's so easy for a mountain biker to just give up on a 20-inch because they're so hard to ride, aren't they?
Yeah, they really are. And I don't know what made me stick with it, because I could have just used
Jump bike.
well, maybe back then there were no real dirt jump bikes, or you
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
so maybe that is why I stuck with it.
And was this a racetrack? Did you ever do any BMX racing at all?
I think just one.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was never appealing to me to do BMX races. But the riding on a BMX track itself, just
Well,
for the jumps and all of that, was the greatest thing ever. Because in Switzerland at that time we didn't have any dirt jumps, so that was as close as you could go. Obviously, then when I spent my winters in California, I saw all of those dirt jumps, those trails, and that is just a different world.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I had an experience with dirt jumps, and again, not huge dirt jumps, but I raced and rode BMX when I was a kid up until I was 17, and they didn't really have dirt jumps as such. We had BMX tracks, and then we all had jumps that you built, on waste ground and in the woods and stuff. So it was similar, but the jumps were never quite as steep.
Yeah.
Um, and I the first time I had a bit of a quite a long break from riding BMX bikes, and then when I got into mountain biking, I got a BMX bike again, and ended up at Sheep Hills in California, where I'm sure you've been
Hmm.
numerous times. And I got there with my friends, I was like, wow, this looks weird. What did how do you approach these steeper jumps? I was okay doing a double jump, that was wider than the jumps that were there, but I just didn't quite in my mind understand. And the first time I tried it, I went at the speed that I thought was fine, took off, and just basically stalled in the middle of the air, in the middle of the jump. And I was like, "Holy shit, this is uh, this is scary." And then obviously, I got the hang of it. But like you said, it's the coolest feeling ever, isn't it? When you just jump in, and it's just so much fun.
Yeah, yeah. Have you been there when after the World Cup, I think in '99, when we
Yeah,
were at the World Cup in Big Bear,
yeah,
and then somehow the whole World Cup just went down to LA and into Sheep Hills, and we had the biggest jam ever at
yeah,
that Sheep Hills.
yeah, yeah.
Such a jam. And I remember I was riding Sheep Hills with my four cross bike with click pedals.
No way, no
Yeah.
way, brilliant. But yeah, I mean, there's some of the, from the period I raced, Claudio, that those times at Sheep Hills and just hanging out with everybody,
Yeah,
they're as memorable to me as racing the World Cups. It was so much fun.
yeah, yeah. Mm.
Yeah, and so many different people would be there. Like I remember going there with Dave Cullinan and Lopes and Steve Pete and that, and Cully and Lopes were amazing at it, and me and Steve were kind of learning it, and then but then on the other side you'd have all the pro BMXers and people like Corey Anastasio and Stephen Murray that were doing mass flips when I'd never even seen a flip before.
Yeah,
And then you had, on the other side of things, you had people like Scott Sharples, who was, a really good downhiller, but wasn't as good on the dirt jumps. And there was just such a mix of people there. It was incredible.
yeah, that was good.
It was fun times. Uh, I don't know if you remember, but it would have been close to that year. Might have been the year before because I went out. The first time I went out to California was in the winter time was the end of '98, I think, and I was staying with Steve Pete. He had a condo just down the road from Sheep Hills, and do you remember Johan Engstrom?
Absolutely.
He was living in his car at Sheep Hills. I don't know if you remember that.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
I think he was riding for Cannondale at the time. Obviously an amazing downhiller, especially in the.
No, he was on Scott at that time.
Oh, was he on Scott then? I thought he'd signed for Cannondale.
Or
Ah,
maybe, yeah, it was that switch
yeah.
from, yeah, yeah.
But all I remember is, he was on like a factory team, and I was just starting out, and I was thinking, why is this guy living in his car at Sheep Hills? But yeah, it was just so much fun. People kind of made do with what they could to spend the winter there. It was brilliant.
Yeah. Hmm.
Okay, so obviously your friend suggested that you went and did a downhill race. Where was that first downhill race, and what kind of bike did you use for that?
It was a pirate bike, that Swiss company that one guy just welded the bikes on his own from steel.
Yep.
And I borrowed one of my friend's bikes. And with that team, I went with the team. Sari Jurgensen was on that team as well.
Oh, no way.
And so, yeah, that was a race in Switzerland. And it was totally nuts. Like there was a section on a ski slope that you just went down straight. We had that back in the days. It doesn't exist anymore, but sometimes back in the days you would just go down straight down a ski slope, and like sometimes you'd still be riding on a hardtail. Sometimes you have like 4 inch of travel, if even, or 80 mil of travel. And we went down that ski slope, and they had a speed measure, a speed
Yeah,
trap,
speed trap,
and we were going 100
100k an hour.
100 on those old bikes.
Yeah.
And I still remember after that speed trap, a bump took my hands off the handlebars, and I somehow managed to stay on the
Get back on.
bike. That was, holy moly, that stuff we did in those first races was just totally nuts.
Yeah,
Yeah.
crazy stuff. Some of obviously the level of riding now is insane, and how fast they're going. But in relation to the bikes that people were on and the speed they were going on those bikes, it was
And the risk that we were taking.
yeah, it was kind of more dangerous, wasn't it?
Well, in Nevegal at one of the World Cups, I think it was in '98. Um,
That was my first ever World Cup.
Same here, same here.
Was it?
Yeah. Um, and that was just a switch from single crown forks to double crown forks.
Yeah.
And I was still on a bomber set one from Mazoki, and those high speed high-speed first sections of the track.
Like a big wide motocross track, wasn't it?
Yes, and I was like going flat out. Suddenly, my front wheel blocks, and I fly over the handlebars. I had no idea what happened. I get up, I see the dropout of my fork broke off.
Oh my God.
So I go down to Marzocchi, show them that, and they say, "Yeah, well, why don't you ride the triple crown, the double crown,
Yeah,
the new one?" And I said, "Well, you just brought that out. No one has it yet."
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, do you know what? I actually had a set of those Marzocchi triple clamps at that race. I just got them before we went um,
Yeah,
from the team I rode for, which was called Club Bruce Rottweil that year. They were sponsored by Windwave, which was the importer from Marzocchi, and they gave me a set of them forks just before we went, and they were so good.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So, cool. And so, what year was that first downhill race you did?
98, I think.
So,
No, is that even true? Well, it was the first World Cup.
yes,
Like
but the downhill race that you did in Switzerland, can you remember when that was?
96, I think. No, the first Navigal one was even 97.
Oh, you did the 97 one.
Yeah.
Okay. I
Uh-huh.
remember watching that on the TV. I think was that the one that Cedric won in the rain? No, no, that was the
Possible.
one where Cedric got tangled up with an umbrella, I believe, in the crowd. Did Corrado Herring win that one?
Possible. Possible. I don't know.
I
Don't
think
remember.
I think I used to watch them and be so into it.
With the synthesis bike.
Yeah, yeah, um, yes, yeah. And so, how did the transition come from doing that first downhill race in Switzerland to doing the World Cups?
Well, I think that first downhill race in Switzerland was just a tryout. I was still doing cross country, and that was just like, you know, basically just trying things out. But
Yeah,
I knew I wanted this. So in '97, then the first real downhill race was already that World Cup in Nevega.
no way, no way.
That was pretty crazy, yes.
Straight
So,
in at the deep end.
yeah. Not possible anymore these days.
I don't think so anyway. No. Cool. So, and had you got on a like to ride for part of a team at that point, or were you just kind of doing it on your own?
Yeah, the first year was on my own. I trashed quite a few bikes, which everyone did at the beginning. Everything broke, and then the year after, in '98, I was on a Swiss Mongoose team, which was basically a BMX team, but they also wanted a mountain biker. So I was with them. They didn't have a downhill bike at that time, so it was at that time Brian Lopes and Lee Donovan were the international
Yeah.
Mongoose team, but they rode intense bikes.
Yeah.
Obviously, I had to go with the real Mongoose bike, which was a 100 millimeter bike that was really not made for downhill racing. It came with 100 millimeter rock shocks in the front, and I think had 120 millimeter in the back. So I put a boxer in the front, and I went again in California when I was training there. Went to a machine shop, and I had no clue what I was doing. I just thought I make my own link, like
Yeah.
if if you put the shock a little further down and you put a bigger link, you might get more travel out of it. And I got so much travel out of it. I had no idea how much it was. Um, but then obviously when you change the link, you also need a stiffer spring.
Yeah.
and I think I had like a 800 spring in there or something, an 800-pound spring to make it work.
Yeah.
And it actually did. And like, again, riding with Eric Harder and Brian Lopes and Dave Cullinan, they were all like, what the fuck? Like, how is this working? Um, but then once at the World Cups, this thing broke apart. Um, was still good fun, but then I again borrowed other bikes. Um, had some decent results already in Switzerland, but no breakthrough. But then the fall after, the autumn later, I was picked up into the Swiss Tomac team, which was very much linked to the international Tomac team because again with Sadi Jorgensen,
Yeah.
who was also on that one, and then I was on proper bikes and everything changed, and then that's also where I became Swiss champion for the first time in '99.
Brilliant. And so, I mean, I actually did a podcast with Rich Houseman last week, and who was on the Tomac team.
Yeah, I was gonna say when you said Rich Houseman before, I have good memories with him.
Yes, yes. And so obviously that was the year that they had the in '99 they had the World Cup in Big Bear.
Yeah,
And yeah, I remember that, the Tomac team, it looked super cool, didn't it? It was so like dialed and the bikes looked so cool. And that must have been a pretty cool experience to be part of that program.
yeah, John Tomac. He wasn't only fast; he was also stylish. He had the colors and everything was set properly. So, and I was not quite like that. I was always the dirty punk.
Yeah. But it must have been cool. I remember I remember seeing you at a race and I think we were I must have I can't remember what happened. I think I'd injured my hand or something. And I usually did the duel, because I just enjoyed it. And I was watching. I remember you had a super cool Tomac hardtail.
Yes, yes.
That thing
The,
was,
the Magnum 00.
yeah, that was trick, that thing.
Yeah,
Have
it
you
was,
still,
huh?
have you still got any of those bikes at all?
No, not at all. I was never smart enough to keep any of those cool bikes. I never knew they were gonna be so legendary.
Oh, insane.
Yeah. At the time when you're riding them, they're just a tool, just something you work with, and you don't, or I didn't realize
Yeah.
how much they would mean in the future.
Yeah, I know. I know. Yeah, but and what was it like? That was a cool team that at that time with Sari and Rich and John Tomac was still racing and managing the team. Did you learn a lot from those guys and what was your take on all that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the way that Tom Tomac approached racing was something special. Um, and the entire time with him and with the team, being able to spend time on his farm in Colorado and go for rides through the desert and in Moab and so on. Those are wow, almost makes me cry thinking of those times.
That's such a cool thing you did.
Yeah,
Um,
that was fun.
yeah, amazing. And some really iconic teammates there. I mean, Sarah Jorgensen was super quick on the podium a lot, and she was. If there'd have been social media back then, Sari would have had the most views,
She would
clicks.
have smashed it. She would have 100% smashed it, but I also think she's not that kind of person
Yeah.
um, to go big on social media because she's very modest in a
Yes.
sense,
Yeah.
and she's also very real. She does it because she loves it and not because she wants to be a clown on Instagram.
No, no, for sure. But I'm sure, like, how cool she was and how fast she was, and
Absolutely, yeah.
people would have wanted to follow what she was doing anyway.
100%, yeah.
Cool. And so how long were you on the Tomac team for?
3 years.
3 years.
3 years.
For
I
the
think it did it even last any longer, or was it over after that? I
Oh, I
think it
don't
was
don't
over.
think it did. Yeah, kind of. I don't know. I don't know what happened with it. Because it was such an impact when it started. Like one of my best friends bought a Tomac downhill bike, uh,
Hmm.
and I remember thinking, "Wow, that thing's cool." And yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what happened there. You'd know more than me.
I
Uh,
think the brand went down for a while, um, and it only came back up then in 2008 when I actually then founded their
team.
factory racing team. Yeah.
Yeah. So after, so what was that? Would that have been about 2002, 2003 when the first John Tomac team ended?
Yeah, it went from 99 to 2001. And then in 2002, I got on that insanely big and fast Maxis MSC team.
Right, that was 2002. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
And up until that point, Claudia, what was kind of your best results that you had on the World Cup level?
On the World Cup level, I think fast qualifiers and fast split times, but I never made it. I
Never.
always try, like, John Tomek once told me in Mountain Dan, hey, you should really try to make it down with the bike in one piece because you're always trashing stuff.
Just pushing too hard.
Yeah, yeah, it was quite a kamikaze sometimes.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't. It was 19th, 18th, or something.
Yeah, but still, still good results.
Yeah, 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 but no top tens yet.
Yeah.
No, that actually that's not true. I did a top 10. Yes, yes. You remember the race in Leza in Switzerland? Lesin?
That
Yeah,
was my favorite track.
yeah. So that could have been my first World Cup win, but again, I fucked it up. But including a major fuck up, it was still my first top 10. So this was it rained massively. It was a total mud fest.
Was that the first year or the second year? It was 2001 and 2000. No, sorry, 2000 and 2001, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it could have been the second one.
Second one. Yeah. Well,
Just
I think the second one as much it was really muddy at the first one, I remember because I was saying this to Rich actually. After qualifying, I borrowed Brian Lopes gave me a set of Hutchinson spikes for the final.
exactly those Hutchinson spikes were the key.
Yeah, and for the first say minute of the track, I was kind of like riding a little bit cautious, like I did in the qualifying, and then I realized how much grip I had, and
Yeah,
then on I just started going faster and faster, and ended up 11th, which at the time was my best result.
and I was 10th.
You were 10th, brilliant, brilliant. And
Yeah.
then the year after, I was so confident going back to that race, and I remember qualifying ninth place without my chain had come out of my MR. Remember the big MRP things? Um,
Yeah.
chain came off and it was dangling on my pedal. Remember the big long straight where you had to pedal before the last off camber stuff?
Hmm.
I was having to skateboard along there, and I qualified ninth, and that was the only time at a World Cup where I thought I think I could get on the podium. I was,
Yeah.
that confident, and then in the final, I got a front flat on the first corner, and that was the
Wow.
end.
But Yeah, so I'm not sure in which year mine was. Um, it was like a full-on mud fest in the final,
Yeah.
and I remember I was just pinned, like so confident and so on it. And then remember there was a little uphill. It was you went down into a ditch and then there was a uphill.
Yeah.
And so before going down into that ditch, you had to go in between two trees with a couple of roots.
Uh-huh.
And up until then, I think I had fastest split time.
No way.
And then I went over the bars into that ditch, totally lost it, had to get on the bike again, run up that uphill, and get back onto the bike. And even including all of that, I was still 10th
Yeah.
at
Amazing.
the end of the race. And I think it was Michael Pascal or so who
Yeah.
won the race.
Yeah.
And I think my split time was faster than his. I was like, oh, come on.
Oh, real.
Yeah, but so that's how it basically went throughout my entire career. It's like I had a lot of super good qualifying results, a lot of super good split times, but
Piecing it together.
yeah, then when it counted in the final run, there was always something. Always, I was always so close to a win, and then somehow screwed it in many different ways. It was like you would not even believe it.
Yeah, I mean, I had some disasters as well, but it was hard, and I guess even in the this day and age, there's riders that show tons of speed and potential, and you think this guy's going to win any time now, and it just sometimes never happens for them, does it? Or it takes them a long time to get that result, and then which maybe gives you the confidence you need for that, very top level.
Yeah. Hmm.
Um, and so tell us a little bit about that MS team and how that came about. So you went from the Tomac team straight onto that MS team, and
Yeah,
was
Maxis MSC.
yeah,
This was the Spanish or European distributor for Maxis,
yep,
and they came up with this huge team, and they basically took half of the field,
yeah,
not half of the field, but we were nine riders,
yeah,
and there was Oscar Saiz, Fabien Barel, Cyril Lamio, me, and a couple of locals, or local Spanish riders, and we had a big truck. They organized the European Maxis Cup.
yeah,
Um, like it was a big organization, and being in such a fast team, riding with them
yeah,
all the time, put me on a different level too.
yeah,
So then that year, I was finally in the top 10 and I made my podium. Um, Still, I had another story where I could have won the race, but then crashed again. But um, yeah, that was a good experience too.
yeah, of 100%. And where was it you got that podium? What was that, in America?
Mountain End, my
What's
favorite track.
Okay, so pretty cool track to get the podium on for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
And what was it like getting onto a team with the likes of Burrell and Oscar, to me two very serious and professional fast riders.
Yes, but very different ones too. They
Yes.
have very, very different styles and very different approaches. Um, Obviously, also a very different approach to uh, any UK riders or any US riders.
Yeah,
Um, you can learn a lot
I bet.
um,
Yeah.
on on many levels, not just on the bike. It's also, but then it's also a decision whether you want to be like that. It's, you know, I tend to be very, very focused at World Cups, and but then when you're at the last local race at the end of the year, I might also just have, fool around a little bit and just have fun because it really doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah.
And there's other people that don't appreciate it because as soon as there's a clock ticking, it's
Yeah.
a race and you have to be fully serious about it. And that's I'm not saying one is wrong and one is right. It's just very different. And when I was fooling around at the end, at the last race of the season in Spain, some others in the team did not like it that much.
No. Fair enough. Fair enough. Um, and so how long did that go on for racing for that team?
Well, that was a economic decision by the team, not a results-based decision. They didn't get the distribution for the tires, for the Maxxis tires all over Europe, and so therefore I was useless in the team.
Right.
Um, so even though I had my best year ever, they actually coming home from the World Cup in Montana, they told me that I'm not going to be on the team anymore next year. And that's right after having my first podium in the World Cup.
Right.
Um, so that was a bit of a rough one, but so then, I was never one that wanted to swap from one brand to the other.
Oh,
Um, but it just happened. That's the way it was. So the next step was then going to the B1 team in the Netherlands, which again was a completely different story.
yeah. Tell us a bit about that.
That was with Bas de Bever,
Uh,
and that was pretty good fun too. But again, sadly, and now that I'm thinking about it, that's a bit of a repeating pattern there. They were also in their last 2 years of
Team.
of the brand. Even the brand went down, so I was only there for 2 years, and
And,
then
and what
yeah,
year was that, Claudio?
23 and 24.
Uh, oh, 03 and 04.
Sorry, yeah.
Yeah. 03.
03 and 04, yeah.
So at that time, I think Gerwin Peters had retired by then, hadn't he?
Yes, when I was on B1, he was already not racing anymore.
And was Mikel Pascal still on the team then, or had he moved on?
He moved on. I think he replaced me at Max's MSC, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, got you.
Yeah,
Just trying to remember all the,
yeah, yeah.
the moves that were going on then. Cool. And so, was that a different team again to the MSC and to the Tomac team? Was there many similarities in any of them?
No, that was very different. It was obviously not as big, not as organized, which is not a problem for me. I mean, all of us know that as a mountain bike downhiller, you don't depend on a team or a national team or anyone. If you want to go training, you go training.
Yeah,
You get organized yourself, and that's the way we grew up in the 90s. You go ride, and you don't wait for someone to take you riding.
yeah,
Um, and this also probably relates a little bit to what we started with at the beginning with why are Swiss the Swiss riders not any better at in downhill. I heard it a lot that, well, we don't get the support, um, blah blah blah, and I'm like, well, you don't wait for the support, you just
oh,
go riding, and then and if support comes, it's probably because you're doing quite well.
yeah, 100%.
Um, but the support doesn't come first; the riding comes
Yeah.
first.
I know that's what blows me mind with some people. you must have had the same, hey, how do I, I've had this result and done this. How do I get sponsored? And I'm like, well, you don't get sponsored by asking. You kind of, people will notice you if you're doing good enough to be on a team, you've got to be doing good at a certain level before you can get onto a race team.
Yeah, yeah.
So and then so from there, the B1 thing after that, where did you go then?
Then the Intense team came up, the Austrian Intense team, which was the factory team at that time. So I was on it with Chris Kovarik, and so that was where again wild times. That was again a big organized team with my friends from Austria,
Yeah,
um, and yeah, another very big setup, and they're still going now.
yep,
Um, and again, I had really good times with them, good results as well. I was in Livigno in 2005, was it? Yes. I
uh,
was the non-skin suit world champion.
oh, you mean when the World Championships were there?
Yeah, Livigno World Championships. I think that was 2005.
Yeah, I think it was. That was the year after the Leger Worlds.
Yes, that's possible. And again, Fabian Barrel won them,
Yeah, yeah,
and I was 11th, and I was the first person without a skin suit.
good stuff. You should have got your own jersey.
Yeah, maybe they should hand out a rainbow skin suit and a
Yeah, a
rainbow
rainbow
jersey.
jersey. Yeah, yeah, brilliant. Cool. And at this point, you'd been on quite a few different teams, for not your own choice sometimes, but you rode for quite a lot of different teams. So, in the back of your mind, were you ever thinking about setting up your own race team at that point?
Not up to that point, because that in 2005 I was still yeah, um, that was still top 10 level. So as
Yeah,
long as you're in the top 10, you're not actually thinking of much else.
guess not.
And then in 2006, things started to become a bit harder. I started training more and got less out of it. And then even more so in 2007, where I basically completely maxed out everything I could max out. I had the same trainer as Greg Minard, Stefan Girard, um, and I followed his training program down to the second. I did everything I could possibly do, but my results just went worse and worse. And so I had, at the same time, I already had a daughter,
Yeah,
a family,
yeah,
and I couldn't justify anymore putting my full focus on
just on yourself.
my ego trip of trying to be a racer. So I had to figure out something new. And then Lupo, the team manager from MS Racing, told me, hey, there might be a door opening with Tomac, the brand, coming back up. The brand was bought, and they needed someone to create a team, a racing team for them. And once my head switched, I basically put all the efforts that I put into racing straight
That
into the team. So the racing wasn't important anymore. It was just something I still did, but my focus went into creating that Tomac racing team.
brilliant. And
Yeah.
just before we move on to that, like um in at that time, so I guess what year was that when the last year you were focusing on the downhill? Was that 2000? 2007, did you say?
2007, yes.
And it's crazy to think of, but that's like, we're coming up to nearly flipping 20 years ago. But what was a training program for downhill like off Stefan Girard? What kind of things were you doing?
There were different approaches. Stefan Girard was one that did very short trainings, but brutally intense ones. Like you would blow your brains out on a daily basis.
Right.
And I had other trainers, which I was always much more successful with. Those were cross-country trainers, and they let me go on long, long road rides for hours and hours and do all sorts of intervals, but not quite as intense as the ones from Stefan Girard. So
Okay.
you spend a lot more hours on the bike, but it didn't feel like you had to puke every day when you're on the bike. So to me, the long hours did me better than the intense ones from Girard.
And those like intense training sessions, what were they more like just sprints and stuff like that?
Yeah, sprints of all sorts from 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 25 seconds, 45, 1 minute, um, all of it. And just constantly like, and sometimes, the which ones are the ones that are really painful and they're really gonna make you sick. And if you see them on your schedule 2 days ahead, you're already, oh no,
About it.
in 2 days I have to do this again.
And do you think he? I mean, he trained a lot of top athletes. Do you think he did the same sort of training program for everybody? Do you reckon?
I think so, yes. And some people take it better, and some people. For me, it was definitely the long hours and the not quite so intense was better to me.
Sure. Okay,
Yeah.
that's interesting. And it, when you've got a trainer like Stefan Gerrard, was there so many hours a week on the downhill bike that he monitored as well, or what? How did the downhill bike training go?
Yeah, like Stefan is very um he's one of those trainers who knows what he's talking about when it comes to downhill. So obviously he integrated that also in the plan. The other trainers I had, they were more just endurance and fitness trainers basically, and then I had to do my own
Yeah.
downhill training.
Okay. Yeah. So they were basically getting you physically ready for the downhilling, but the downhilling you kind of had to do yourself.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, got you. Wow. Yeah, it's interesting, interesting stuff for sure.
Yeah, I had one other interesting one was when I had an injury in 2003. And so the hospital offered to get me back in shape with a completely different approach. It was like a German trainer that didn't really relate to mountain biking at all, but he put a training program together for me, which was basically just weightlifting,
Right?
with the long bar, weightlifting of all sorts.
Yeah.
And I did that, and I went to New Zealand over the winter and kept on doing that. And within weeks, I gained in New Zealand, I gained like 10 kilo. All my life, I was 83 kilo, and suddenly I was 93.
Wow.
Um, and that was the year on B1. And I was such a machine that sometimes I would just rip my bike apart in a sprint, like get on the pedal, and the pedal was on the ground because it broke off. Uh, so I
Great.
was strong, but my results were nowhere because what you do with all that power in a downhill race, you need the finesse, right? You need the feeling. You need to feel every little thing in the bike, and like all that raw power doesn't do anything in a downhill race.
Sure. Yeah, I mean it's super interesting that you say that. And over the whole time of downhilling that I've been involved in it, there has been lots of different body shapes and big guys and small guys that have done well at downhilling. So it's quite interesting. Like back in the early days, when you were racing and I was doing some racing, you had Nicholas Vulio who weighed nothing. He didn't look like he'd ever been in the gym, and yet so fast and precise. Like Mikel Pascal, I can't imagine he did a lot of sprints and a lot of gym work, but
Yeah.
ridiculously fast. But then some of the Aussie guys come over, and you had like Nathan Rennie and Chris Kavarik, who were just naturally super strong. I don't think they'd done it by hours in the gym, and they could ride as fast as those guys. It's quite interesting. And then you know, in the current times now, you've got Bruni, who looks like he goes to the gym a lot. He's super strong. He's got muscles, and then you've got Jackson Goldstone and Asa Vermette that just look like little kids at school. It's crazy, isn't it?
That's what I always loved about downhill racing. There's no real recipe.
Yeah,
And when people tell you or tell other people this is how it's done, they're like, no, you didn't understand.
yeah,
Like everyone finds his own way,
yeah.
and there's no one way that works.
No,
And like we also know all the party stories. We know some riders would never drink a bit of alcohol and never go to a party because they needed to sleep enough. They needed to be in bed at the right time, and they need to go spin their legs, etc., etc. And yes, they won World Cups, but there were also other riders who would come straight out of the party and go to the start and win a World Cup.
yeah,
And
yeah,
and so both works, and the question is what works for you, and that makes downhill racing so good because there's not just one way to win.
yeah, 100%. I'm a strong believer that obviously you've got to be fit and you've got to train and you've got to ride your bike a lot. But to me, it looks Jackson Goldstone is such a good example. He just looks like he's having so much fun on his bike, um, and it's enabling to win races.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, cool. So transitioning into running the Tomac race team, who were the first riders on that team, and how did that go?
Um, it was quite interesting. I mean, everything was new. I was new as a team manager. I had, like no matter how much effort I put in, and it was a lot of effort to create that team, I did not find the sponsors that were needed to make it happen. Um, yeah, yeah. So we had mainly juniors. It was Joe Smith from the UK, Reese Willemsey from Australia, another Australian rider, another Swiss junior, plus two Swiss four cross juniors. So it was quite a big team. And during the winter, I thought I had quite a few sponsors lined up, which they all said, yes, we're very interested, very interested. And so I kind of counted on it to come through. But then it was February and I still had no contract signed.
Yeah,
And those sponsors, they weren't industry sponsors, they were outside sponsors. And they just wouldn't reply anymore. And at some point, I had to say, okay, I have a family now. I've put everything on one card,
yeah,
and it didn't come through. What am I doing?
yeah,
And then one of the sponsors we had was the father of those two four-cross riders,
Okay.
and his company was a sewage company.
Okay.
And he said, "Well, if you want to, I can give you a job at my company." Like, well, okay, let's go. So in that first year, when I ran the Tomac team, my day job was going down into the shitholes in the city and clean the shit out of the channels underneath the city. And then during the night, I would organize the team and then go back into the sewage the next morning.
That's some commitment from you, Claudio.
Well, I had no choice.
Yeah. I hope
Um,
the riders appreciated what you were doing there. And
yeah, and then again, that Tomac story with the brand was only 1 year because they went down again.
yeah. Who,
And
who was it that took a who was it that bought the Tomac brand off, John?
uh, Joel Smith,
Oh, okay. Yeah, I know.
yeah,
Yeah.
okay,
Guy.
yeah, he had bought it, and we got along really well. He was really happy with what I did, but yeah, for it just the restart of the brand didn't happen.
Yeah.
And so, but then by then Scott needed someone to run a new team for them, and they saw what I was doing for Tomac, and they thought this was this was good or good enough, and then so we swapped. And this is then when the team thing became real,
Yeah. Okay.
together with Scott. Yeah,
And that was quite a number of years, wasn't it? What the Scott team you ran? What years did that go from?
I did it 10 full years from 2009 to 18.
Wow.
So it
And
was 10 seasons. Yeah.
that's a long time. And did Scott always give you a good enough budget to run the team properly? Was some years better than others, or was it always quite a good amount of money with being such a big company?
I would say it was good. It was never enough to actually run the team, so I always had to find other sponsors too. So for a while we had Gstaad. So when the team was called Scott Gstaad
Yeah.
or Gstaad Scott,
Yeah.
um, and then when Gstaad pulled out, we took over with Velosolutions and made it happen.
Okay. So,
Yeah.
obviously, Velo Solutions is such an amazing thing you've created and super successful. Tell us a little bit about that in how that came about from, because you were running a World Cup race team and then starting Velo Solutions. How did that all happen? And-
Well, that actually happened in parallel. It wasn't after running the World Cup team.
Oh, that's
So
what I mean. You must have been so busy.
yeah, as we all did in the past, we built our own trails for training or our own jumps, and then in 2004, two friends of mine asked me, "Hey, why don't we?" Back then there were no real trail building companies, and they did not yet exist. And they asked me, "Why don't we found a company that plans and builds bike parks?"
Uh-huh.
And so we did that in 2004. But my two friends, they thought I would be quitting racing when we do so, and I just continued racing, and they were like, "Well, we don't want to do this without you." So they stopped the company, laid it still, and went to find other jobs until I was done racing. And when I was done racing, um, their jobs were already too good. They didn't want to come back.
Yeah.
So I then had the company on my own. One of the first bigger projects we did was the World Cup track in Champery,
Yeah.
which then kind of became legendary with the races that also you have commented on. I think,
Yes.
yeah, the most the most iconic race run ever with you as a commentator.
Yeah, and probably the most drunkest commentator ever as well, maybe.
Yeah, the good old times.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, just funnily enough on that, it was just, you remember the Freecaster. It was just so laid back. Rob was doing the commentary, but they'd ask different people to come in and commentate, and they'd just keep bringing you beers all the time. It was just great fun, and yeah, it became a legendary commentary run because we were going wild.
Yeah.
Um, but you started off, building the, downhill tracks and bike parks and stuff, and then how did it come about where you got into the pump track building?
A lot of things came together as my previous boss from a bike shop. At the beginning, I wasn't living from racing. I worked in a bike shop, and my boss there had the idea of um, building a pump track for the city of Zurich.
Yeah.
Um, kind of, it was really weird because that boss, he was never really a track builder, nor did he even know what a pump track was. But for some reason, he just had that idea he needed to build a pump track for the city. And I asked him, like, well, you don't even write them, you don't, what's the deal? I don't get it. But I helped him, and he had the idea to put cement into the dirt to make it
Hard.
last longer. And I said, bad idea, bad idea. You cannot put cement into the dirt. It's not gonna work. But he insisted. He's a very stubborn dude, and he made it happen with the city. And I, at the same time, had the possibility to build a pump track for my hometown in the mountains. And
Yeah.
I thought, well, if we think of putting cement in it, we might as well do it right and use full concrete.
Yeah.
And so we did that, and that was quite a success already. And it kind of triggered our area where I live in the mountains in Switzerland to to look into the topic of pump tracks a little deeper because I live near Lenzerheide, which all of you know is a very big mountain biking destination,
Yeah.
and and back at that time, our region here was looking for a way how to attract more mountain bikers,
Okay.
and they realized to be attractive for mountain bikers. Um, we, as the people who live here, need to be mountain bikers as well. So that the tourists, when they come, they don't feel like
Yeah.
strangers. They need to feel understood. So how do you get our own people to ride more bikes? And they said, well, through the kids.
Yeah.
And how do you get the kids on bikes? Well, let's try it with pump tracks.
Yeah.
And so with this concrete pump track that I had already built, they said, let's continue doing that. We'll promote or we'll help every town who wants to build a pump track by giving them a 20% of the budget.
Okay.
And so this started, and then soon after, the city that I'm living in now approached me and said, "Hey, we want to do this with you, but we have a new idea for you. You might not like it, but we just want to share the idea. What if you use asphalt?"
Right.
And I'm like, yeah, yeah, well, let's try. And so they said, okay, we'll put you in contact with a road construction company that is very, very eager to try it out, and you just try to make it happen with them. So I went to their headquarters. They gave me an excavator and a bunch of gravel, and I quickly built a turn for them. and they came in with a truckload of asphalt and with their best asphalt team, and they laid the asphalt into that turn, and it happened. It worked. And so 2 months later, we've built the first asphalt pump track in the world in the town where I'm living now,
Brilliant.
and that sparked an entire. You know what happened by now. There's 1,000 pump tracks around the world. Um,
That's
yeah, it
incredible.
sparked a global wave.
And I mean, you've been all over the place. There's Pump Track World Championships now, which I watched the one recently again. And you've been to some crazy places around the world building pump tracks and getting kids on bikes that would have no chance. It must be pretty rewarding and amazing, some of the places you've been to. Tell us a few of the better ones that you've done, do you think?
Well, it's been 900 by now. Not all by me, not all by me, but by the company. There's so many good stories and many good memories. The ones that you are talking about are our Pump for Peace projects, which the Pump for Peace um, organization came up actually when I was sitting with the race team with Brendan Fairclough in Fort William. We had the idea, hey, we should we should build a pump track in some sketchy place, like in a war zone or whatever. And I said, yes, yes. I've had this experience in Thailand at the Cambodian border where I saw these kids from the slums coming out and ride our pump track or our pump track and just wouldn't stop with rusty bikes without pedals, barefoot on just the axle, and this was so amazing to see. And I knew we somehow had to make this possible, even if there isn't a rich client.
Yeah,
And that's why we founded Pump for Peace, which basically is just an organization that facilitates the construction of our pump tracks in developing countries.
brilliant, brilliant. That's so cool.
And yeah, so that led us to many projects in Africa, in Nepal, in Armenia, in Nicaragua, and those are the projects that I'm focusing on now.
Okay. And obviously the amount of pump tracks you've built, how big is the company? How many people work for Velo Solutions?
Um, Approximately 300.
Wow.
We
Okay.
have in Switzerland we're 35 people, and then we have partners in about 30 countries.
Wonderful.
And they're different depending on which country it is. They have between 5 and 50 employees.
Brilliant. And do you kind of work on a template to build a pump track? Have you got so many different templates, or are you always just trying to build an individual pump track?
Yeah, out of those 900 that we've built, there's not one the same as the other. So I do every drawing individually.
Unreal.
I mean, obviously, a lot of them look similar because it's quite difficult to invent a wheel every day.
Oh,
But still, we do every design individually.
no way. That's brilliant. Well, yeah, congratulations on that. That's fantastic. We've actually just got a small Velo Solutions pump track built last year, just down in the next village from where I live in Walkerburn,
Yeah,
which is cool. They're just I think they're just finishing off the floodlights, so kids can ride it in the night as well. Especially in the winter in Scotland, it goes dark at 3:30, 4 o'clock. So yeah,
yeah,
um, and I believe we might be getting one in Peebles, so fingers crossed that that'll happen.
yeah, yeah. Cool.
And so, Claudio, tell us obviously another big part of your career was running running the Scott race team with Brendan. I know sometimes I remember a few times that was frustrating with you where Brendan was transitioning from, when you run a race team, it's all about your riders getting race results, and Brendan, as we all know, is super had the ability to be on the podium and was an amazing fast downhill rider. And then, sort of started transitioning off doing some more free ride stuff because he's so good at all that. How was that to manage?
Um, what should I say? I mean, obviously he was the media magnet. He was the spectators' favorite, or maybe still is. Um, with the concept of my team, that was quite hard to handle because the way I came into managing a team was like, let's have all the same race kit, let's have the same sponsors, um, and look like a real team.
Yeah,
And then obviously not every team ran it that way. The syndicates, for example, allowed their riders to have their own
sponsor.
uh, clothing sponsors for a while. Um, and then with Brandon coming in, as good as he is, and but it did not work with that concept because he came with his own clothing sponsor, came with his own this and that, and I struggled with dealing with that situation.
Cool. Yeah,
And also he was obviously the most important rider in the team. So we somehow needed to make sure he's happy, but I also needed to make sure that the rest of the sponsors are happy, and it wouldn't just be a one-man show
yeah,
because um, so that was kind of tricky to handle. And I also got some criticism from Scott because I said, hey Brandon, we are sponsored by Shimano. You have to ride Shimano pedals.
yeah.
And he said, no, I'm riding Crank Brothers pedals. I'm like, dude, like we are paid by Shimano.
Yeah.
You have to ride those Shimano pedals. And then I get a call from one of the bosses at Scott saying, hey, make sure you keep Brandon happy. Don't treat him like that.
Right.
And so I kind of couldn't really control my team anymore the way I would
Yeah,
control it because there was this superstar who
yeah,
was more important than the team itself.
yeah. Just got
And
any.
that was a bit of a tricky situation.
Yeah,
Uh, but yeah, all good.
yeah. No, it's you know, when you're working in a team with athletes and sponsors, I think, so many people from the outside don't realize how many challenges there is sometimes, with different things. I ran a team for 16 years, and I've definitely had some, difficult things to deal with, as you have. Yeah, it's hard, but I guess and one of the questions I had, obviously Scott made their own race gear, and Brendan's always been for so many years on Troy Lee, and iconic brand. The Troy Lee clothing looks cool. But when Scott's your main sponsor, was that difficult for them? Did they not try and push the Scott clothing as well as the bikes, or is it two separate things, really?
No, that's for them. Brandon was so important that having him on their clothing was not important at all, as long as he was on their bikes.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I've had similar situations like that, and sometimes, if the fans like to see somebody in a certain race kit, which then makes your bikes more desirable because that person is riding them in a different, it all kind of evens itself out, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah. At the end, that's things you learn when you get older is you need to stay flexible in your head, and you cannot be stubborn with what you thought was right at the beginning. Maybe it isn't anymore after a couple of years, and then you cannot stick with what you thought was right at the beginning because maybe it's not right anymore.
Yeah,
And I had to learn that, you know.
yeah,
Probably everyone has to.
yeah, for sure. Um, and then obviously, you spent a lot of time in the commentary booth with Rob. How did you sort of get into that? And did you really enjoy that?
um, well, it came because of the course previews that we started in 2012, which kind of put me again closer to Red Bull in the mountain biking. And so later in the season in Windham, when Connie wasn't there for a reason, they asked me if I could replace him for that one race.
Yeah,
Um, and I said, yeah, why not? I mean, it wasn't something I was trying, looking for.
yeah,
It
it
was
just
just,
came about.
I was there because I was there with the team and was doing the course previews anyway, and they asked me to fill in for their missing co-commentator, and I said, yeah, okay, no problem. And very first thing I did was I saw that was in the first race. They should have kicked me out right then. Um, I saw this rider in the start gate with a top head to toe Troy Lee. I was like, oh, there we got Brandon in the start gate, and Rob looks at me like, and then I'm like, oh, and no, it's not Brandon. That's the very first thing that I
So,
did, and
no way, that's brilliant.
and so I completely didn't even know my own rider.
Well, well, I don't know. I didn't do as anywhere near the amount of commentary that you did with Rob, but when I did it, I just came into the booth. I had no notes, nothing planned. Whereas I don't know what Rob was like in later days, but Rob is actually very organized with all the things that he's got to say throughout the show, isn't he? Were you the same, or did you just kind of wing it?
I totally just winged it all the time for the 7 years or so that we did it. And yes, Rob is very organized. He does his homework for sure.
Yeah.
He's very serious about what he does, and he's amazing. Like he does a super good job, and whoever works with him looks good next to him because he pulls such a show that yeah, I'm quite grateful for those times.
Brilliant. And you know what? Not really, not yourself, but when it all changed the other year and Rob wasn't doing it anymore and they had different commentators coming in and Cedric Gracia did some commentary and he got some I saw some negative comments, but it must be super hard to commentate in English when it's not your main, language. Did you find that difficult? I mean, obviously, I know you speak really good English and you spoke English for a long time, but it must be hard to think and speak quickly in somebody else's language.
Yeah, but I think the speed is actually what people who were not native English speaking, that's what they appreciated because I was talking a bit slower than
Okay.
Rob. And so a lot of people from non-English countries told me, hey, we really like the fact that you speak a bit slower than Rob so we can understand what you're saying because someone who did not grow up in English struggles to understand Rob when he's going at full pace,
So,
while when I go at full pace, it's still slow for for
so it's
you know
yeah.
yeah.
Okay. And did you never? did you never have to do any sort of voiceovers in Swiss? Did they never get you to do any things like that?
I did some German commentary as well, in for the Sierra Bajo races and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, there were all sorts of different situations, but not really voiceovers, no.
Okay. No. Cool. And before we stop talking about the downhilling, how do you, obviously you've been in it for so long and done so many different important roles in it. How do you see the sport going at the moment with the big changes with Warner Brother taking it over and Red Bull not doing the commentary? The last year they tried the semi-finals, and then I believe this year they're going to a, a 20 qualifier and a last chance qualifier, I believe. Do you think the sport's going in the right direction, Claudio?
Let's say there's no right and wrong. I must say I very, very much appreciated the time that I had in the sport where it was still accessible for everyone and where it was not pulled into a too elitist direction, where it was not a Formula One, where anyone could still come in and have a shot against the best riders in the world. That was kind of the true roots of our sport for me. I never had that intention of making our sport a Formula One. But there's different people who see that very different, who want downhill to be a Formula One. Um, and it's just not what I appreciated from the sport. I'm not saying it's bad. Obviously, if you make it a Formula One, you can probably make more money with it. But is money always the most important factor? That's a question. I think we had an awesome time from the 90s until now. And the fact that I lost that position with Red Bull at that moment, I it was just perfect. Like I've done it for a long time. If Red Bull would have continued with me, I would have probably stayed and done it for a lot longer. But the way it's going now, I'm not missing it at all. It's
Oh,
I can now ride my bike a lot more, being more at home, and also do other things in life. Mountain biking is still just as much fun, but that change that is currently going on in the world of racing or downhill racing, um, it's not my thing.
yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, good answer there, and yeah, I agree with a lot of that. And but like you say, there's no right and wrong. Some person will have a who's in charge has a different idea, and you've got to run with your ideas, I guess.
Yeah.
Uh,
As as you said, no right and wrong, and it takes a lot of courage to do what they're doing,
yeah,
changing everything up so much, and knowing that the first couple of years are going to be super hard, and everyone is just going to be criticizing you for doing what you're doing, and you have to pull it through no matter what, even if 80% of the people are against you, they have to continue to prove that what they're aiming to do is beneficial for everyone.
yeah,
And the mountain bike industry has a big tendency to always criticize everything, to never be happy with anything.
yeah,
Mm. And someone who runs the show will always be being criticized.
yeah,
And so I don't want to be one of them. I just say I appreciated the openness of our sport in the 90s up until 2 years ago, where everyone could have a shot.
Yeah, it was
Mm.
brilliant. I mean, I'd have never been able to race a World Cup if I'd have been starting now, you know. So yeah, I know what you're saying. Uh,
Yeah, like none of us would have had access to World Cup racing if it was like it is now.
yeah,
Um, so, but anyway, we might as well say, if they reach their goals of what they're aiming to, we might have to shake hands with them and say, congrats,
yeah,
you've an incredible job, and you went through quite a lot of resistance to make that happen.
yeah, absolutely, for sure. And so, before we wrap it up, Claudio, it's been brilliant chatting with you about all the different things. I could go on for hours because there's so many more things I'd like to ask you, especially about Velosolutions and everything else you're doing at the moment. But you know, out the long period you've been involved in downhilling, who's your top five most, you know, top five riders over the whole period that you think is has achieved the most and been the best downhillers, you know? Maybe not just going off race results, but you know, the top your top five.
Greg Minnaar, Steve Pete, um, yeah, Loic. I quite like Loic a lot.
He's brilliant.
Um, Obviously Nicola Vullo, and now we've got only one left, huh? Let's say Sam Hill.
Okay. I mean, there's so many you could choose from, but that's a pretty solid solid five riders there. Awesome. And so what's 2025
It was very sorry. I don't have the word in English, but I should probably mention the women as well.
of course. Yes.
Sabrina Jaunier, obviously Anne Carroll Chausson, Rachel Atherton. Who else would stand out? I would say I stick with those three.
Yeah, I would put those three at the top for sure. That have done the most that have done incredible things for sure and been the most dominant. Yeah. Then there's been other people, you know, coming and out, you know, like, you know, obviously in current times you've got Tarnay, you've got Camille you know, lately. Back in the early days there was Missy Giove and Lee
Yeah,
Donovan.
obviously. Yeah.
Uh, you know, and then obviously I am, you know, off the past few years, you know, Valley is obviously going on the same trajectory as Ankaro and Rachel and Sabrina Johnnier, yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. True, true.
Yeah, yeah, and you know, long may these amazing iconic riders keep coming through because when a new person comes that is just exceptional, it's super interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Um, what's 2025 looking like for you? You know, what's the main things that you're aiming to do this year?
Um, well, besides those Pump for Peace projects that you never quite know when they happen. You know, you might be in contact with some of these cities in Africa or somewhere else for years, and then you never know when you can actually pull the trigger and go there and build the pump track.
Yeah,
We're looking at quite a few, but currently with the knee, I cannot go myself. But it might take time. There's some in Africa, some in Central America, which I just don't know when exactly
come
they're
on.
gonna happen.
Yeah,
Then obviously one big one is the pump track world championships, which You wanted to relate to that before because we had in November we had the World Championships finals on one of those pump peace tracks in a township in South Africa, which was obviously a very big event for us. And I think this is also why you got in contact with me after seeing that.
Yeah, it was awesome. I loved it.
Yes, so the goal is to bring more of our pump track world championships to developing countries to a pump for peace track, because the experience we had there in South Africa was just something else that was goosebumps all the way.
It was, just watching the faces of the kids watching the event when the little bit I saw was so good, so cool, you know.
Yeah, yeah. And but this year it's not going to be in a developing country. This year it's going to be during the mountain bike world championships in Switzerland.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
cool. Oh, and when is that, Claudio?
Beginning of September.
In September. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to get out to watch that. That would be cool if I'll have to try and figure that out. And that'll be near to Chambéry.
Actually, right at the base of the valley, when you come out from Champery down to Monte, that's where we've already built the World Champs track there. It's ready to go.
Oh, nice, nice.
Yeah.
Oh well, that I'll look forward to watching that, whether they're in person or on the on the feed. So brilliant, brilliant. Well, thanks so much, Claudio, for the chat. It's been awesome and interesting, and I've seen a lot of what you've done in person in the early days, and and then from watching the live feed and stuff in later days, and yeah, I hope everything goes well with your knee and continues well with Velosolutions, and just congratulations on an amazing career that you've built for yourself in mountain biking. Cool. Okay, well, thanks so much, mate. I really appreciate it, and it's good to catch up.
Yeah, yeah. Hope to see you soon again.
Yeah. All right. Thanks very much, mate. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Cheers.
Have a good one. Thank you.
Bye, mate. Bye.